folks in the U.S. that have attended public protests or plan to attend increasingly large public protests in the United States objecting to the growth in authoritarian government and governance in the U.S., a few things have happened in the last few days that are worthy of note. And these, I think we can understand to be the kind of stepping stones that the government is putting into place in order to criminalize otherwise constitutionally protected speech in the U.S. So first, 2 days ago, Governor Greg Abbott in Texas issued a proclamation declaring CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations, I think the largest organization representing Muslims and their interests in the U.S., declaring them a foreign terrorist organization, something the governor of Texas does not have the power, legal authority to do, but he did it anyway. Secondly, Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, issued a policy a few weeks ago that becomes effective today, declaring 4 foreign organizations in Germany, Italy, and Greece as foreign terrorist organizations. One of them has the word Antifa in its name, although it's not clear what that designation actually means. But effective today, they are on the list of foreign terrorist organizations. And these are loose coalitions, not really even groups in Europe, that have a revolutionary purpose, have been on the left fighting fascism in Europe. And then just yesterday, the State Department also declared that it will, effective next Monday, be putting, what's it called? The Cartel de los Soles, of the Suns, a Venezuelan cartel, on the list of foreign terrorist organizations as part of what the federal government is doing in so-called policing drug cartels in Latin America. Now, the Trump administration has put more groups on the foreign terrorist list than any administration ever. And while this is bad for those groups to the extent that they actually are groups, really what it's doing is putting into place a set of federal laws in the United States that make any kind of material support or concerted or coordinated activity with those organizations highly criminally regulated. So if you made a donation to one of these groups, but actually the material support need not be money. It could be, in the terms of coordinated activity, re-forwarding on social media, some media campaign or a flyer from one of those groups. That counts as material support. So in effect, what the expansion of the declaration of foreign terrorist organizations is doing is giving the federal government increased power to regulate through this idea of material support or coordinated political activity, the ability to criminalize what is otherwise protected speech and protest in the U.S. if the government can argue that this group or an individual has somehow supported one of these foreign groups, Antifa or whatever that supposedly is. And so they're creating the stepping stones, as I said, for attacking activists here in the United States. Now, who? Well, we can look at the policy papers that have been issued by the Heritage Foundation, by this other group called the Capital Research Center, where they're actually listing the groups that they want the federal government to come after. Certainly, it's those groups and their funders. They're starting with OSF, George Soros's foundation, but anything that they could plausibly call Antifa, but also Stop Cop City, the Movement for Black Lives, the Sunrise Movement, other groups that are doing climate change work, and then left political and legal organizations as well. So I think there's a lot to worry about here in terms of what we might see in ramping up of the regulation of public protest in January. What we're hearing is that the IRS is going to start swinging into more regulatory action in January, revoking the 501c3 nonprofit status of some of these organizations. that the Heritage Foundation and others are listing. They can also engage in criminal prosecutions for organizations they feel have broken the law. And as all of us take to the streets to protest, ICE raids, the deployment of the National Guard, a whole range of things, we too, our organizations and us individually, may be subject to criminal prosecution through material support or coordinated political activity with these organizations extraterritorially, these foreign organizations, which we actually have nothing to do with, but it provides the fig leaf for the government to quell those protests through criminal law. So just keep an eye out for this. It seems like it doesn't have anything to do with domestic politics, but that's absolutely what it's about.